Hey all, I'm sorry I was unable to connect with you. I don't know what's going on. I can't get Wi-Fi, and for some reason my hotspot's not working either. So I just wanted to at least touch base and say a few words about the Miller's Tale, Chaucer's probably most popular tale, kind of a stereotype about him, which you know is not true, right? But that he writes sort of these short, raunchy stories. So the official genre, one way to look at the Canterbury Tales is as a collection of different genres, right? And so this genre is called a fabliau, Fabliaux. I'll have it in the notes. And basically, it's simply a short tale that involves a trick, usually for either profit or pleasure, meaning money or sex. Um, and it's a second tale following The Knight's Tale. And it's a parody. That is, it both imitates and mocks The Knight's Tale. The Knight's Tale is about, well, two young knights who fall in love. They're in prison. They fall in love with this beautiful Emily, and it's basically this sort of love triangle. They have a huge tournament at the end with 100 people on each side to decide who gets Emily's hand. She wants neither one of them, but she has no choice in the matter. And just as Arcita wins a tournament and Emily smiles on him, his horse throws him and he dies. And so one of the questions that the Knight's Tale raises explicitly is how can we reconcile, right, having, say, a benevolent and providential God with this kind of occurrence, right? Especially how do you explain a young person's death, right? And so the knight raises these philosophical questions, and what you have is the host then turns to the monk, presumably the next highest on the pilgrimage, and also a spiritual figure who might offer some kind of consolation. And of course, the miller is drunk, and he says, "Nope, I'm telling the next I'm telling the next tale." And so what we have immediately is this break in the hierarchy. And in fact, in the Canterbury Tales, my favorite parts are these so-called links between the tales, because here you have the various characters talking to each other and usually fighting, etc. And so what you have, a major theme in the Canterbury Tales, is kind of this repaying tale with tale. So the tales not only represent the tellers or characterize the tellers, but they also respond to each other. Okay, so and so the Miller says that he's going to tell a tale about a wife. And the Reeve jumps in right away and says, there's no need to tell this kind of tale. The Reeve apparently is a carpenter also, in addition to being a Reeve, an overseer of an estate. And he takes immediate offense. And the Miller says, you know, if you're not married, you don't have to worry about your wife cheating on you, which says something. And then he also says at the top of 88, kind of mocking also directly the Knight's Tale, one shouldn't be too inquisitive in life, either about God's secrets or one's wife. You'll find God's plenty, all you could desire, of the remainder it's better not to inquire. That is, don't worry about divine justice, right? In the same way, he kind of flattens it, don't worry about what your wife is doing behind your back or in her free time. And then this is followed on page 88 by Chaucer's sort of famous disclaimer. He says, you know, look, there are plenty of different kinds of characters on this pilgrimage. Some of them told kind of, you know, raunchy stories. Go ahead and choose something else. Turn the leaf if you don't want this kind of story, which, of course, this warning label always just leads people right to the story, right, because you want to see. Okay, so the Miller's Tale represents sort of this town and gown rivalry. It takes place in Oxford, and we have Nicholas, who is renting a room, right, from John the carpenter. Um, and Chaucer tells us what kind of student he is at the top of 89. You know, he's sort of using his learning. You're supposed to learn astrology in order to in order to, well, in part foretell future events, right? But also doctors used it to deal with sickness and this kind of thing. He uses it to forecast the weather. And his main concern on page 89, right, is basically making love in secret, Chaucer says, was his talent. And then we're introduced to John, the carpenter who owns the house where he lives. This would always be a tip-off in the Middle Ages. If you ever have a character who's married to a younger woman and who's jealous, you know she's going to cheat on him. And this is exactly what happens. So this carpenter had married a new wife not long before and loved her more than life. She was a girl of 18 years of age. Jealous he was and kept her in a cage. For he was old and she was wild and young. He thought himself quite likely to be stung. And, you know, Chaucer or the Miller, whoever you want to say is speaking, kind of points out he has no Cato on his shelf, Cato an authority, who would have told him that you should marry people who were like yourself, both socially but also in terms of age. And so what we have then is this student who thinks he's super smart and young, right, who's pitted against this older man with the young and beautiful wife. The description of Alison on page 90 is famous. Chaucer touches on all the senses. We know how she feels. She's soft like wool. We know how she tastes, like honey mead. Her sound is like a swallow, which I assume is a good thing. I don't know what a swallow sounds like. And then, of course, he spends a lot of time just describing what she looks like. And one of the things with this description, normally in the Middle Ages, you would begin at the top and work your way down. And what Chaucer does, he starts up here, goes down, but he keeps coming right back to her middle, right? The place of interest on her. Okay, and we have this funny part of the parody of The Knight's Tale that we have in The Miller's Tale is The Knight's Tale is about courtly love, it's about chivalry and fighting for a lady. And of course we have Nicholas seducing Alison here on page 91. He made a grab and caught her by the quim. I've never heard that word, but it's by a part of the female body, and said, unless I have my will of you, I'll die of secret love, oh darling do. Then he held her haunches hard and gave a cry, love me all at once or I shall die. The Middle English says, or I will spill, which is kind of, anyway, it means die, but it means something else as well. And of course, she has sexual desires too, and she gives in right away, and it's just a matter then of time and place. Chaucer adds a second triangle here. We're introduced to Nicholas's rival, Absalon, who is a parish clerk. He has numerous talents. He likes to dress very fancily. And he is a barber. He can let blood. He can do all sorts of things. But there's one detail that will become important later, as you guys know. He was a little squeamish in the matter of farting, Chaucer tells us. And so he does what he can to seduce Alison, and she's just not interested, mainly because, again, unlike courtly love where you're supposed to worship and love a woman from afar, she likes the guy who's close by. And so Nicholas comes up with this trick, the Noah's flood trick, which apparently is used in other fablio as well. And he tells John that he has determined with his astronomy or astrology that there's going to be a flood, and so he needs to put some water troughs up in the barn and hang them from the ceiling, put food in there. They have to sleep separately, and then therefore take the roof off the barn so when the water comes, they can cut the rope and then float away. And this, of course, allows them to have their night together. But it's interrupted, of course, by Absalon, who is there. He's tried courting Alison in a number of different ways. He's tried money, he's tried gifts, and nothing has worked. And so he comes to her room, or the window outside her room, very early in the morning. Lodge would be daybreak, which they would say 4 a.m.-ish. and he wants a kiss. And it's, of course, very, very dark. We forget how dark it is in the Middle Ages, right? Um, and she sticks her rear end out the window and says, "Give me a kiss." And I have to read it, sorry. "And at the window out she put her hole in Absalom. So fortune framed the farce, put up his mouth and kissed her naked arse, most savorously before he knew of this. He started, something was amiss." Okay. And so they laugh. It's very funny. And of course, it's funny, his love is completely cooled, we're told. And he goes to the blacksmith and asks him for this hot coulter. He's going to go back. And he does go back and tells Allison he has a ring for her. And Nicholas wants to improve upon the joke. Now, Nicholas had risen for a piss, this is the bomb 104, and thought he could improve upon the jape and make him kiss his arse ere he escape. And opening the window with a jerk, stuck out his arse, a handsome piece of work, the butt and all, as far as to the haunch. And Absalom, all set to make a launch, said, "Speak, pretty bird, I know not where thou art," because it's so dark. This Nicholas at once let fly a fart, as loud as it were a thunderclap. He was near blinded by the blast, poor chap, but his iron was ready, and with a thump he smote him in the middle of the rump. And of course, this causes Nicholas to yell, "Water," or "Help, water, water, help, for heaven's love," which causes John to then cut the ropes that are holding his tub up high in the ceiling, and he falls down. Um, his arm in falling had been broken double, but still he was obliged to face his trouble. For when he spoke, he was at once borne down by Nicholas and his wife. They told the town that he was mad, that he'd gotten to that there got into his blood some sort of nonsense about Noah's flood. The vain imaginings and fantasy had made him buy the tubs, and he had hung them in the rafters, etc. Right? And so what you have at the end here is everybody gets their justice, basically, right? So the carpenter's wife was truly poked, but she wanted that. So she's not, right? She's not punished in any way. And if his jealousy to justify, and Absalom has kissed her nether eye, and Nicholas is branded on the bum, and God bring all of us to kingdom come. And so we have this quote-unquote happy ending, except for the poor carpenter. So the larger point here has to do with human suffering, right? That's the big question kind of raised in The Knight's Tale, right? How can you have a providential God and have, and it's the same thing raised in St. Augustine, right? How can you have a providential God? How do you reconcile that with human suffering? In the Fabliaux, basically, justice is about you get what you deserve, right? John should have known better. You know, Absalom is squeamish of farting. Nicholas is overly horny, and they all get basically he gets harmed in the place on him where he does his sins. And I think the second point of the Fabliaux, it's supposed to be fun, right? We're told in the Cambria Tales the story should both instruct and entertain. And I guess the other thing is he being Chaucer, making fun of medieval romance. You know, the courting, the fighting for a lady, right? The reverence, right, and putting the lady on the pedestal and all of this kind of stuff. Chaucer apparently found this stuff very, very silly. And I think I mentioned in class, you know, the only references he makes to Arthurian romance are, you know, he refers in one tale to the tales of Lancelot that women seem to like, kind of in a sarcastic way. And then, of course, the Wife of Bath's tale, in which he makes the Arthurian knight basically a rapist. Okay? All right, you guys, I'm really sorry I was unable to log in. Have a great break, okay? And I'll see you when I get back. Bye.